"Please, I am not your enemy." The rancher stared, then broke his code for an Apache girl. The rancher had lived alone on his land for many years, long enough that silence felt normal to him. His ranch sat far from the nearest town, surrounded by dry hills, open sky, and long stretches of land where nothing moved except the wind and the cattle. People knew him as a quiet man, serious, strict, and distant. He did not visit town often, and when he did, he spoke only when necessary. Everyone said he had a code, rules he never broke. One of those rules was simple: never get involved in other people's troubles. His life had not always been this way. Once long ago he had dreams, family, and hope, but loss had taught him that caring too much only led to pain. Over time, he built walls around his heart, just as he built fences around his land. The land was honest. It demanded hard work but offered no lies. People, on the other hand, brought complications, so he chose solitude. That evening, the sun was sinking low, turning the sky orange and red. The rancher was riding along the edge of his property, checking the fences and cattle before nightfall. His movements were slow and steady, practiced from years of routine. He liked this hour of the day when the world felt calm and predictable. As he approached a dry ravine near the boundary of his land, his horse suddenly slowed. The animal sensed something unfamiliar. The rancher narrowed his eyes and scanned the ground. At first he thought it was a shadow or a fallen branch. Then he saw movement. Someone was lying near the rocks. He stopped his horse and remained still. His first instinct was caution. Strangers were rare out here, and when they appeared, trouble usually followed. He considered turning back. It would be easy. He could tell himself it was none of his business and ride away before the light faded. But something made him look again. The figure slowly tried to sit up, then collapsed back to the ground. The rancher noticed how small the person looked against the wide land. Carefully, he dismounted and approached, keeping a safe distance. As he drew closer, he realized it was a young girl. Her clothes were dusty and torn. Her face was pale and her eyes were filled with fear and exhaustion. She looked up at him, trembling. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rancher's face was unreadable, shaped by years of discipline and restraint. He noticed a scrape on her arm and dried blood near her ankle. She had clearly walked a long way and not by choice. Finally, in a weak but steady voice, she spoke, "Please, I am not your enemy." The words struck him harder than he expected. He did not know why. Maybe it was the way she said them, as if she had practiced them many times. Or maybe it was because no one had ever said such a thing to him before. He stayed silent. His code echoed in his mind. Don't ask questions. Don't interfere. Don't bring trouble home. The girl watched his face, searching for any sign of mercy. She did not move closer. She did not beg again. She only waited, as if she already knew how fragile her situation was. The rancher looked around. The land was empty. No one else was in sight. If he left now, no one would know. He would go back to his quiet life, his simple rules, and his safe distance from the world. But as he looked at the girl again, something stirred inside him, an old memory he had buried deep. He remembered a time when he himself had needed help and found none. He remembered how silence from others had hurt more than words ever could. He cleared his throat. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. She hesitated before answering. "I ran," she said softly. "I could not stay." He did not ask from what or from whom. Some answers were heavy, and he sensed hers would be. Instead, he studied her condition. She was clearly dehydrated, barely holding herself upright. "You can't stay here," he said, though his voice lacked force. "I don't need long," she replied quickly. "Just water, I will go." Her honesty surprised him. She was not asking for protection, only a chance to survive another day. The rancher turned away and stared at the horizon. This was the moment. This was where his code mattered. Helping her, even briefly, would break it. And once broken, it could never be the same again. Slowly, he walked back to his horse and took out his canteen. He returned and placed it on the ground between them, then stepped back. She crawled forward, her hands shaking, and drank carefully, as if afraid he might change his mind. As she drank, he noticed how young she truly was. Life had forced her to grow up too quickly, but she was still just a girl. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. That should have been the end. Water given, rule bent but not broken completely. But when she tried to stand, she fell again. The rancher closed his eyes briefly. He felt anger not at her but at the choice placed before him. The land had always been simple. This was not. "You'll ride," he said at last, his voice firm. She looked up in shock. "I don't want trouble for you." "I know," he replied. "That's why this ends at my cabin. After that, you go." She agreed without question. He helped her onto the horse, keeping his movements careful and respectful. The ride back was slow. The sun had nearly disappeared and the air grew cold. Neither of them spoke. But the silence between them was different now. It was not empty. It was heavy with unspoken understanding. When they reached the cabin, he guided her inside. The place was simple: wooden walls, a small table, a bed, and a stove. It reflected his life, practical, quiet, and untouched by warmth for a long time. He gave her a blanket and pointed to a chair. "Sit," he said. "You leave at first light," she nodded. "I understand." As she rested, he stepped outside, staring at the darkening sky. He knew he had crossed a line. The code that had kept him safe had cracked. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. This night would change him. Inside the cabin, the girl closed her eyes, holding the blanket tightly. For the first time in days, she felt safe enough to rest. And though neither of them knew it yet, their lives had become connected by a single choice made in the fading light. Morning came slowly to the ranch. Pale light crept through the small cabin window, touching the wooden floor and the rough table near the wall. The rancher woke before the sun fully rose, as he always did. Habit guided him more than thought. For a moment, he forgot about the girl. Then he heard a soft movement from inside the cabin, and the memory returned. He stood outside for a long time, breathing in the cool air. The land looked the same as it always had, quiet, wide, and still. Yet something felt different. He had broken his rule last night, even if only slightly. Letting a stranger sleep under his roof was not something he had done in years. He told himself it was temporary. She would leave today, and life would return to its normal shape. When he stepped back inside, he saw the girl sitting on the chair near the table, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She looked more awake now, but there was still caution in her eyes. She rose quickly when she saw him, unsure of what was expected. "You can sit," he said, noticing her tension. She sat again, folding her hands in her lap. The silence between them stretched, uncomfortable but not hostile. He placed a small pot on the stove and poured water into it. He did not speak while he worked. Words had never come easily to him. After some time, he handed her a cup. "Drink," he said. She accepted it with both hands. "Thank you," she said softly. He watched her carefully. She drank slowly, as if she had learned to make things last. He noticed the way she studied her surroundings without moving her head too much, taking in details while staying alert. This was not the behavior of someone who felt safe often. "You said you would go," he said, not harshly, just plainly. "Yes," she replied. "I will. I just needed rest." He nodded. That should have settled it. Still, neither of them moved. He turned his attention to the stove, pretending to be busy. In truth, he was thinking. Something about her story, or the lack of it, bothered him. She had not asked for sympathy. She had not shared details. She had only asked not to be seen as an enemy. "Where will you go?" he asked before he could stop himself. She looked surprised by the question. "I don't know yet," she answered honestly. "Somewhere safer than before." He frowned slightly. The land beyond his ranch was harsh. Towns were far apart and kindness was not guaranteed. He knew that better than most. "You're hurt," he said, pointing to her ankle. She followed his gaze. "It will heal," she said quickly, as if afraid he might change his mind about helping. Not without care, he replied. He brought a small box from a shelf. It held basic supplies, cloth, ointment, and bandages. He placed it on the table and stepped back. You can use these. She hesitated, then carefully unwrapped the cloth around her ankle. The wound was not fresh, but it was not healing well either. She cleaned it slowly, biting her lip but making no sound. The rancher turned away to give her privacy, though he stayed close enough in case she needed help. As she worked, memories stirred in his mind. He remembered his own injuries from years ago, how he had treated them alone, believing that pain was something a person should handle without complaint. Watching her now, he realized how young she truly was. Strength had been forced on her too soon. When she finished, she looked up at him. "I won't forget this," she said. He shrugged. "No need to remember," he replied. "Just leave when you can." But even as he said it, he knew it was not that simple. Later that morning, he saddled his horse and prepared to check the cattle. Normally, he would have left without a word. This time, he paused at the door. "There's food in the cabinet," he said. "Eat, then go." She nodded again. "I will." As he rode out, his thoughts followed him. He told himself he was doing the right thing. Keeping distance had kept him alive all these years. Caring led to loss. That was a lesson life had taught him well. But as the hours passed, he found it hard to focus. His eyes kept drifting back toward the cabin whenever he could see it in the distance. When he returned in the afternoon, he expected the cabin to be empty. Part of him hoped it would be. That would make things easier, but she was still there. She was sitting outside, watching the land quietly. When she saw him, she stood. "I tried to leave," she said quickly. "But I felt dizzy," he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "You should have rested." "I didn't want to be a burden," she said. He looked at her carefully. She was pale again, clearly pushing herself too hard. His frustration grew, but not toward her. It was toward the situation, toward the fact that his simple rules were no longer enough. "Come inside," he said. She obeyed without argument. That evening they shared a simple meal in silence. Bread, beans, and water. Nothing fancy but filling. He noticed how she waited until he began eating before she did, a small sign of respect that did not go unnoticed. After they finished, she spoke softly. "Why do you live out here alone?" He stiffened. That question touched a place he rarely allowed himself to visit. "Because it's quiet," he answered after a pause. She nodded as if she understood more than he had said. They sat like that until the sun dipped low again. Shadows filled the cabin and the day faded into night. "You can stay one more night," he said at last. "Leave tomorrow." Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you," she said. "I won't cause trouble." "I believe you," he replied, surprising himself. That night, as he lay awake on his bed, he stared at the ceiling. He wondered when he had started believing again. He wondered what this girl would become if she survived. And he wondered what he would become if he continued to help her. Outside, the wind moved gently across the land. Inside, two lives rested under the same roof, both changed by a decision neither had planned to make. The third day began with a heavy silence. The rancher woke before dawn, but unlike other mornings, he did not rush outside. He lay still, listening. The cabin was quiet except for the soft sound of breathing from the other side of the room. The girl slept lightly, curled beneath the blanket. Even in rest, she seemed ready to wake at the smallest noise. He rose quietly and stepped outside. The sky was pale, the stars fading as morning approached. He washed his face with cold water and stared at his reflection for a long time. The man looking back at him seemed older than he remembered. Not just in years, but in weight. He had carried his past for too long without letting it breathe. He had told himself she would leave today. That was the agreement. One more night, then distance restored. Yet something deep inside him resisted that ending. When he returned inside, the girl was awake, sitting at the table. She looked healthier than before, but her eyes still carried caution. "You're up early," she said quietly. "Always," he replied. She hesitated, then spoke. "I think I can walk farther today." He nodded. "Good." Again, that should have been the end of it. But words lingered in the air, waiting to be said. He poured water and handed her a cup. She drank, then rested her hands on the table. "I don't want you to think I stayed because I wanted to," she said. "I stayed because I had no choice." "I know," he replied. She studied his face. "Most people don't believe me when I say things like that." He met her gaze. "I do." That surprised her. A faint expression crossed her face, something like relief mixed with sadness. After a while, he went outside to work. She followed slowly, keeping distance but staying close enough to see what he was doing. He fixed a broken fence, repaired a loose board, and checked the water trough. She watched quietly, learning the rhythm of his movements. "You do everything yourself," she said. "It's easier that way," he answered. "Lonelier too," she replied, not accusing, just stating a truth. Her words stayed with him long after the task was done. As the sun rose higher, the land grew warm. He noticed her struggling to keep up, though she tried to hide it. When she stumbled slightly, he stopped. "You're not ready," he said. She lowered her eyes. "I don't want to cause problems," he exhaled slowly. "You're not." That admission surprised them both. They returned to the cabin. He brought out a small piece of dried meat and bread. She accepted it gratefully. While they ate, he finally asked, "What were you running from?" She froze. Her hands tightened around the food. "I don't want to bring danger here," she said. He considered her words carefully. If danger is already looking, silence won't stop it. She looked down. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke slowly, choosing each word. "My family moved often," she said. "We try to stay unnoticed, but some people don't like what they don't understand. They think fear gives them power." He listened without interruption. "They came to our camp one night," she continued. "Not to talk, not to listen, just to take." Her voice shook, but she did not cry. "I ran because my mother told me to," she said. "She said, 'Run and don't look back,' so I didn't." The rancher felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that kind of command. He had heard similar words once, spoken in fear and love at the same time. "I don't know where I belong now," she finished. "I only know where I can't go." The cabin felt smaller after that. He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the open land. "People fear what they don't know," he said quietly, "and sometimes they hide that fear behind rules and reasons." She looked at him. "Is that why you have rules?" The question caught him off guard. "Yes," he admitted after a pause. "Rules keep things simple." "Do they keep you safe?" she asked. He didn't answer. That afternoon, a distant sound broke the stillness. Horses. Voices carried faintly on the wind. The rancher's body stiffened. "Go inside," he said sharply. She obeyed at once. He climbed a small rise near the cabin and scanned the horizon. In the distance, he saw figures moving slowly across the land. Not close enough to be sure, but close enough to worry him. His code returned in full force. This was exactly why he avoided involvement. Trouble had a way of finding people who tried to do the right thing. When he returned to the cabin, the girl was standing near the door. "They're looking for me," she said quietly. He studied her face. She was afraid, but not panicked. She had accepted this reality long ago. "They won't find you here," he said. "You don't know that," she replied. "No," he admitted, "but I know this land." He showed her a hidden storage space beneath the floor. "If anyone comes," he said, "you stay here, don't move. Don't speak." Her eyes widened. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he replied. The sound passed without incident. The figures never came close. As evening fell, the tension slowly eased, but the feeling remained. That night they sat by the small fire. Shadows danced along the walls. "You risked yourself today," she said. "So did you," he replied. She shook her head. "Running is not bravery." "Sometimes," he said, "it's survival." She looked at him with new understanding. "I think you were someone else once," she said gently. He smiled faintly. "So were you." Silence settled between them, not empty but thoughtful. That night neither of them slept well. The future felt uncertain. The past felt closer than ever. By morning, both of them knew something had shifted. The rancher could no longer pretend this was temporary, and the girl could no longer pretend she was alone. They did not speak of it. They didn't need to. The land outside remained wide and quiet, but the space between two lives had grown smaller, shaped by truth, memory, and the slow breaking of old walls. If you want, I can continue with part 4, keeping the same tone, length, and simple, safe storytelling. The 4th day began with tension hanging in the air, even before the sun rose. The rancher woke early again, but this time his body felt stiff, as if it sensed trouble before his mind did. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening carefully. The land outside was quiet, but it was a sharp kind of quiet, the kind that made a person alert. The girl was already awake. She sat near the window looking out, her arms wrapped around herself. When she noticed him watching, she turned. "I dreamed they were closer," she said softly. He nodded. "Sometimes dreams warn us." He stepped outside and scanned the horizon. Nothing moved, but he knew that meant little. The land was wide and sound traveled slowly. People could be closer than they appeared. When he returned inside, he made a decision he had avoided until now. "You can't leave today," he said. Her eyes widened. "But I don't want to put you in danger." "You already are," he replied calmly, "and leaving before you're ready would be worse." She looked down, her fingers tightening around the blanket. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." He leaned against the table. "Some things are already lost," he said, "and some things are worth protecting." She did not argue again. The day passed slowly. He kept busy, not because the work needed to be done, but because movement helped him think. He repaired tools, sharpened blades, and checked the fence lines closer to the cabin. He chose tasks that kept him near. The girl stayed inside for most of the morning. When she finally stepped outside, she carried a small bundle of firewood. He noticed her limp had improved, though it had not disappeared. "You shouldn't carry that," he said. "I need to do something," she replied. "Sitting and waiting makes fear louder." He understood that feeling too well. Around midday, a sound drifted across the land. Voices, clearer this time. The rancher froze. He motioned for her to go inside without speaking. She obeyed instantly. He moved to higher ground again, his eyes sharp, his breathing controlled. This time he could see them clearly, 3 figures on horseback, moving slowly but deliberately. They were not passing through. They were searching. His jaw tightened. This was the moment his code had always warned him about. If he stepped away now, no one would blame him. The land would forget. Life would return to silence. But as he watched them draw closer, he felt something stronger than fear, resolve. He walked back to the cabin and closed the door behind him. The girl stood near the hidden space, ready. "They're close," she said. "I know," he replied. She looked at him, her eyes steady. "You don't have to lie for me." "I'm not lying," he said. "I'm choosing." He helped her into the hidden space beneath the floor, placing water and food beside her. Before closing it, he met her gaze. "No matter what happens," he said, "you stay quiet." She nodded. "Be careful." He sealed the space and straightened just as a knock sounded on the door. He opened it slowly. The men outside studied him with open suspicion. Their clothes were dusty, their expressions firm but controlled. "We're looking for someone," one of them said. The rancher did not react. "Lots of people pass through," he replied evenly. "This one didn't pass," another said. "She ran." The rancher crossed his arms. "I haven't seen anyone." They watched him closely. Silence stretched. The wind moved across the land, carrying tension with it. "You live alone," the first man said. "Yes." "No visitors?" "No." One of them glanced toward the cabin. "Mind if we look around?" The rancher's heart beat harder, but his face remained calm. "This is my land," he said. "You have no reason to search it." The men exchanged looks. They could feel the resistance, but they also knew the law respected boundaries like these. After a long pause, the first man nodded. "If you see her," he said, "tell her she should stop running." The rancher held his gaze. "I'll tell her nothing." They turned and rode away, their figures slowly disappearing into the distance. Only when they were gone did the rancher allow himself to breathe fully. He returned inside and opened the hidden space. The girl emerged slowly, her face pale. "They came very close," she said. "Yes," he replied. "You protected me," she whispered. He nodded. "I broke my code." She looked at him carefully. "Does it hurt?" He thought about it. "No," he said. "It feels honest." That evening the sky burned with color as the sun set. They sat outside, watching the land grow quiet again. "You could have turned me in," she said. "Your life would have stayed the same." He shook his head. "It would have stayed empty." She absorbed his words in silence. Later, as darkness settled, she spoke again. "I don't want to hide forever." "You won't," he replied. "But you need time," she nodded. "And you?" He looked at the land he had known for so long. "I need to remember who I was before fear chose for me." They shared a simple meal that night. No rush, no fear, just quiet understanding. When the fire burned low, she stood. "I don't know how to repay you." He met her eyes. "Live," he said. "That's enough." She smiled faintly, the first real smile he had seen from her. That night, sleep came easier than it had in days. Not because the danger was gone, but because neither of them faced it alone anymore. The rancher knew the choice he had made could not be undone. The code that once defined him had been broken, but in its place stood something stronger: responsibility. And as the land rested under the stars, two lives moved quietly toward a future neither had planned, but both were finally ready to face. The final days came quietly, not with loud danger or sudden movement, but with long thoughts and careful planning. The rancher woke early, as always, yet something inside him felt settled for the first time in years. The choice he had made could not be undone, and strangely, that brought him peace. The girl woke later that morning and stepped outside into the soft light. The land stretched wide before her, calm and open. She breathed deeply as if trying to memorize the feeling. Her ankles still hurt, but she walked more steadily now. Strength had returned not just to her body but to her spirit. "I think it's time," she said after a while. He knew what she meant. He had known it was coming. "Yes," he replied, "it is." They did not rush. He helped her prepare a small pack with food, water, and a map he had drawn by hand. He marked safe paths, places to rest, and areas to avoid. Each line felt important, like a promise. "You don't have to remember all of it," he said. "Just follow the river mark. It won't lead you wrong." She nodded, holding the map carefully. "You thought of everything." "Not everything," he said, "just enough." They sat together for a long time after that, saying very little. Words felt too small for what had passed between them. Silence had become their shared language. Finally, she spoke. "Before I met you, I thought kindness was something from stories. Something people talked about but didn't live." He looked at the ground. "I didn't live it for a long time." "But you chose it," she said. "When it mattered," he met her eyes. "So did you. You kept going." She stood and adjusted the pack on her shoulders. The moment had arrived. "I won't forget this place," she said. "Or you," he nodded slowly. "I won't forget you either." They walked together to the edge of the ranch where the land changed and the path narrowed. This was as far as he would go. He stopped there. "This is where you turn east," he said. She looked at the path, then back at him. "If I survive," she said, "I will carry this forward." "That's all I ask," he replied. She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him gently. He stiffened at first, unused to such closeness, then slowly returned the gesture. It was brief, but it held years of unspoken emotion. When she pulled away, her eyes were bright but steady. "Take care of the land," she said. He smiled faintly. "It takes care of me." She turned and walked away, her figure growing smaller with each step. He watched until she disappeared into the distance. Only then did he allow himself to feel the weight of her absence. The ranch felt quieter after she left, but not empty. Something remained, something warm and steady. Days passed. The rancher returned to his routines, but they felt different now. He noticed small things he had ignored before: the way the light moved across the hills, the sound of birds at dawn, the strength in his own hands. He no longer worked just to survive. He worked because life had value again. Sometimes he thought he heard her voice in the wind, reminding him to keep his heart open. When that happened, he smiled instead of shutting the feeling away. Weeks later, news traveled slowly, as it always did. He heard that the search had ended. No one had found what they were looking for. The land had kept its secret. One evening, as the sun set, the rancher sat outside his cabin and reflected on the code he once lived by. It had kept him safe, but it had also kept him alone. Breaking it had been frightening, but it had shown him who he still was beneath the silence. He realized that mercy was not weakness. It was a choice, one that required courage. Far away, the girl reached a place where she could finally rest. She carried the map, the memory, and the belief that not all doors were closed. When the world felt heavy, she remembered a quiet ranch, a man of few words, and the night he chose to see her not as a problem, but as a person. Their lives moved forward on separate paths, shaped by one shared moment. And though the land returned to silence, it was no longer lonely. It remembered.